much, Louise. Just going back to what you said about questions, good at being democratic with questions. I know we're all stakeholders in promoting democracy, so we're practicing what we preach. Thanks also for the opportunity to engage. I know the CPA and Bússola Tech have been engaging quite a bit over recent years, so really excited for this latest opportunity. And as you say, Louise, to introduce and discuss the CPA's recently published Parliamentary Handbook on Disinformation, AI, and Synthetic Media. I would like to thank the Organization of American States who have supported the development of this handbook. They're equal partners in it. They were there from the very beginning when it was just an idea in my head. And also ourselves at the CPA and the OAS, we share a philosophy, a belief, a commitment to building awareness about the breadth and depth of misinformation, disinformation, fake news, the overall manipulation of information in undermining the democratic norms and principles that we seek to uphold. I think that the handbook highlights at various stages the importance of collaborative approaches with dealing with the issues around AI and disinformation. So this handbook being a product of collaboration itself is a really positive thing. And I'll also indulge in one more message of thanks and thank Ms. Cassidy Bereskin, who was the consultant and author of the handbook. Cassidy's also the founder and director of Oxygen AI, which is an organization that convenes experts who work around generative AI and the impact on society. I should caveat my presentation. I'm not a technology expert. I do come from the democracy space. I come from the parliamentary strengthening space. So when it comes to questions, if there are questions of a very technical nature, what I might end up doing is directing you towards the recordings that the CPA have from a recent conference on AI, disinformation and Parliament, protecting our digital democracy that we held, that has people far more intelligent than me who spoke about all things AI, synthetic media, disinformation, malinformation, all of those things. So I'll try my best to answer all the questions that attendees have, but if I can't, I might be signposting you. And either way, go and check out our recordings. It was a really positive conference, if I do say so myself. Moving on to the handbook. When we first conceptualized the handbook, what we wanted to do was avoid a conversation about artificial intelligence in the abstract. I think there's a lot of people who want to talk about AI, but it's not super specific, it's not super contextualized. I know that colleagues at Bússola Tech, you guys are very, very good at contextualizing these issues. It's never sort of the science fiction approach. It's never the sensationalism. It's always very, very centered in real applications. And that's why I really wanted to drill into the specifics and place it within the context of democracy and also informed and evidence-based decision-making and public discourse and the threats that AI pose. I think one of the things that really guided us, certainly guided myself, was I'm not sure how many people in the audience are aware of Amara's law, which was really built off the statement made by, I think it was a Stanford professor, Roy Amara, who said when it comes to emerging technologies, we like to talk about the sensational things it's doing right now. We don't take that long-term vision. So I think when we were putting together this handbook, we wanted that long-term vision. We didn't want to engage in sensationalism. And also we did again want to focus in on how it applies to our stakeholders. Another key driver of this project was, again, the CPA's and OAS's shared interest in really, and it does get a little bit existential, what is shared objective reality and how do we avoid losing that anchor of what is real against what has been faked in the age of generative AI and synthetic media. And I'll get into a little bit about how the handbook unravels these issues and then addresses them for our stakeholders. One thing where we start with the handbook, and I should say at this stage that once I finish my presentation, finish Q&A, I'm happy to provide links in the chat function to all of this. So I do encourage everyone to read the handbook. The handbook starts by looking at the evolution of information, disinformation, and media. Obviously, as long as information's been around, as long as communication has been around, disinformation has been around. So as old as democracy is, disinformation is even older. Manipulations, disinformation are ancient, and there have been advances in technology going throughout history that have further enabled the sharing of disinformation. You just have to look at things like the printing press. All of a sudden, you can mass produce misinformation. But it's really those recent advances in AI and machine learning that have exponentially grown the ability to produce misinformation and disinformation. And it's not only about the scalability, the speed and the sheer quantity of disinformation that can be produced now, but also the fact that it's often in online spaces where we have the threat of echo chambers reinforcing people's beliefs and not exposing them to alternate points of view. So we really have had this exponential growth, a real paradigm shift when it comes to disinformation in our democracies. The handbook then moves on to introduce the threat of synthetic media in this new disinformation landscape. I'm not sure how well versed everyone in the audience is when it comes to what synthetic media is, but I think maybe one of the most famous examples of synthetic media is deepfake technology. I imagine a lot of us at this stage now have seen instances of deepfakes. One of the most famous being Pope Francis in the white puffer jacket. Also, there's many featuring Tom Cruise being superimposed on somebody else's bodies, and also a really distressing history of sexualized deepfakes and pornography, which has been a real issue as well. So when we talk about synthetic media, it's really any media that's been produced or enhanced without human hands. It's been done through technology. So we introduce what synthetic media is and the threats that it poses to the disinformation landscape. And really, again, and it comes back to that losing grip on what's real. So all of a sudden you have people suddenly not quite having the same ability to discern truth as they maybe previously had. Deepfakes can be hyper realistic. We do also have things like cheap fakes, which are intentionally bad ones, which have their own sort of narrative building capacities. But yeah, there are hyper realistic deepfakes to the extent where it can be very, very hard to discern. Even experts finding it harder to discern what is deepfake and what's real. Again, it can entrench ideologies and echo chambers. And really the accessibility of these tools, they're far more accessible than they used to be. They really embolden and enable malicious actors now who might otherwise have not had an entry into this space. I know that there's a number of academics who pointed out now that somebody with a smartphone can produce Hollywood level special effects. So it's that accessibility, it's the entry to market, for lack of a better phrase, that also carries its own threats. And then moving on to the specific implications of this synthetic media and AI threats to democracy. I think it's important to consider the threats of AI not just as a technology, but just the sheer presence of AI in society. And one of the things that the handbook really tries to emphasize in terms of informed decision making and public discourse is the issue of the liar's dividend. So whereas you can be a public figure now and have a deep fake of yourself, having you say something you never said, you could also have a recording of you where it is something that you said, it is something that you never want to see the light of day, but somebody posts it, maybe somebody who's politically opposed to you or otherwise has other motives for releasing it, and now you say, well, AI is a thing, maybe that was AI produced, I wouldn't trust what you see anymore. So that presence of the liar's dividend really adds an additional layer to the complexity of maintaining informed discourse. It really is this, don't trust anything you see, just doubt everything, which is a really uneasy position I think, for us to all be in, but particularly those in the public eye, particularly those who are trying to protect and strengthen our democracies and our democratic institutions like parliaments. So then the key thing starts to look at mitigation strategies. In the handbook, this is not an easy thing to do. Emerging technologies, especially exponentially improving technologies, it's not always easy to keep up with them when it comes to mitigating and combating. But really, one of the things that we emphasize in the handbook is the need to have multi-stakeholder approaches. This shouldn't be the responsibility of one actor, one organization, one sector. We need multiple stakeholders coalescing around this issue, and also coalescing around strategies around content provenance. The C2PA, coming from CPA and hearing about C2PA is it's confusing. But things like content provenance, like C2PA, where you can actually have a record of everything that was done to an image or a piece of media, is a key strategy that we all need to coalesce around. And also really media and artificial intelligence literacy amongst the population, and encouraging people to really educate themselves around this topic, I think is key for parliamentarians to do, and also parliamentary staff to do. I think there needs to be a balance when you're mitigating AI and synthetic media, generative AI and synthetic media, whilst of course you want to combat disinformation, certainly malicious disinformation. There may be examples of satire or political comment where there is a piece of synthetic media, but there's no necessarily malicious intentions. It is just purely freedom of expression. And where do you fall in terms of combating that? So it's a really difficult balance to maintain. But I think it all comes back to this issue of, are you trying to promote trust, or are you trying to promote transparency? And this goes back to the content provenance and AI literacy. A number of actors out there, and I would encourage everyone in attendance to learn about some of these actors, including the organizations behind the C2PA and other content provenance initiatives. They often say, look, we're not going to tell you who to trust, because you need to trust us before you're going to trust the people we tell you to trust. So we're not interested in that. What we're interested in is transparency, and saying, well, here's an image, there's all the provenance on it, which is really just, and again, this goes back to me not being a technology expert, but it's really these stamps that say this image was edited using Adobe Photoshop on this date by this individual, and you really have just a track record of everything that was done to that file. And you can say, look, you can trust it, you cannot trust it, that's not our prerogative, but we've given you all the information. It's for you to make your decision based on that. So yeah, there's a number of balances to strike when trying to mitigate against malicious AI and just to moderate AI in general. I think legislators have a number of duties themselves when it comes to handling disinformation. I think, again, to repeat myself, it's promoting public awareness, specifically amongst your constituencies, and also allocating resources to public awareness campaigns and media literacy initiatives around this. So those members of parliamentary administration who are here that maybe work in the tech space within their respective parliaments, or even in the sort of outreach and engagement spaces, I think this is an area of public engagement that does need to be engaged with. Again, we need to be promoting multi-stakeholder coordination, and that's legislatures, governments, AI providers, social media platforms, I think have a huge responsibility. And I think that's been in the news quite a bit recently. I think there needs to be a commitment to evidence-based research on this. So I think parliaments that engage external witnesses in committees, but also other research services, should really be engaging with experts in this space. And I think that goes beyond just the technology experts, the AI experts, the synthetic media experts. I think also social sciences, psychology, human behavior. There's a lot of different elements to this issue. I think there needs to be a commitment as well, especially amongst parliamentarians with their own ethical standards. It might be tempting for a parliamentarian or a politician in general, or somebody just running for public office, to use some of these tools to undermine their oppositions. And I think more fool them, because if you use it, somebody could use it against you. So there needs to be minimum ethical standards, and also this is a very specific practical point, the integrity of parliamentary broadcasting and communication channels. I know a number of parliaments within the Commonwealth family and beyond have their own broadcasting channels, but they also might use third parties. So in the case of looking after your own broadcasting channel, making sure that you have all the security on that possible, and also if you're using third parties, that you get assurances from them that they have their own security. So yeah, I'll finish there. That's sort of where the handbook ends, is these strategies, these tips, these pieces of advice for parliamentarians, but also Parliament as an institution and the people who staff parliaments. I think, yeah, key themes really are this importance of full transparency, full disclosure. Don't try and get caught up in the trust, engaging in multidisciplinary evidence-based research on this, educating your populations, and maintaining your own ethical standards within Parliament and political life more broadly. So I'll finish there, Louise, and if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.